The first sound was always the same, a hollow crack that skittered across the cul-de-sac like a thrown bottle. Elijah Graves didn't need to look up from his daughter's science project to know what had happened. He'd heard that sound 4 times in 6 months, steel against bumper, metal pleading with rubber, dignity bending under a stranger's hurry. He was 47, black, and tired of explaining his anger to people who had never had their anger ignored. He stepped onto his porch, the Texas dusk burning amber across the roofs of Northridge Estates, a planned community for families who care. His wife, Nia, set a hand on his shoulder. "Don't go out there angry," she said quietly. "I'm not angry," Elijah said, and it was true. The anger had settled into something heavier. "I'm resolved." He walked down the concrete path, past the gardenias he'd planted for his mom before she passed, and stared at the ruin by the curb. The mailbox, new black enamel with their number stenciled in silver, hung crooked, its door wrenched open like a sucker punch mid-swing. A white HOA patrol SUV idled at the mouth of the street. The driver glanced once, then rolled on. Elijah exhaled through his nose. Number 5. From across the street, an elderly neighbor, Mr. Harlan Tate, shook his head. "They got you again, son?" "They got us," Elijah corrected. "This is our mailbox," Harlan chuckled. "You talk like your mom." She raised me. Nia came down the steps, their daughter Layla peeking from behind her leg. Layla held the cardboard model of a wind turbine they'd been building together. "They broke the letters," she said, voice small. "They broke the shell," Elijah said. "Not the letters." At the next HOA meeting, he tried again. He chose his words like tools from a tidy drawer. No wasted motions, no heat. The board sat behind a folding table under fluorescent lights, name placards over pressed clothes. In the middle was Brent Carraway, HOA president, silver hair and a management consultant smile. 2 seats over, Pamela Pam Duquesne, attorney in a navy blazer, watching the room like it belonged to her. "We've had 5 impacts," Elijah said, holding up printouts of dated photos. Each time the patrol didn't stop. "I'm asking for 2 things. 1, that patrol drivers be retrained and held accountable for property damage. 2, that the HOA reimburse the costs. Receipts are attached," a ripple of whispers. Brent steepled his fingers. "Mr. Graves, I appreciate your passion, but patrol incidents happen all over the neighborhood. We can't possibly reimburse every accident?" 5 times to the same home? Elijah asked. "My neighbor's boxes are older than my marriage." Scattered laughter. Brent's smile thinned. "Let's not get emotional." "I'm not emotional," Elijah said. "I'm precise. Here are the dates, the photos, the vendor invoices." He slid the folder across the table. Pam didn't touch it. Another board member, a woman with pearls and a tremor in her voice, leaned toward her mic. "Is it possible your mailbox is too close to the road?" "It's the same distance as the ones you approved on inspection," Elijah said. 4 feet, 12 inches per your handout." He raised a copy. Brent sighed. "I understand how this feels, Mr. Graves. But you have to see how your tone, that sense of accusation, can make cooperation difficult." In the back row, someone murmured, "He's always got a complaint." Elijah swallowed, then nodded. "Let me make this simpler. If patrol cars stop hitting my mailbox, I won't have complaints. If they hit it again, I'll assume it's willful negligence. If the HOA won't protect my property, I'll do it myself." Brent's smile stayed. The temperature dropped. "Careful with the threats." "They're not threats," Elijah said. "They're boundaries." He left without slamming the door. Elijah was an industrial machinist by trade. He knew the language of tolerances, the poetry inside a clean cut. In the garage, after Layla slept and Nia graded her students' essays at the kitchen table, he sketched. Not just a mailbox, a statement. Cedar to appease the neighborhood aesthetic. Steel, where eyes wouldn't see. Reinforced base 3 feet down, cradled in concrete like a root that could hold a hillside. A face that looked ordinary, a spine that refused to bow. Harlan wandered over while Elijah traced a template on sheet steel. "You know they're going to call it a trap." "It's a post," Elijah said. "Like every other post on this street." "Except stronger. except respected. Harlan pursed his lips. They'll say you're inviting trouble. I've been polite for a year, Elijah said, sliding the grinder along the line. Sparks feathered across the concrete like fireworks with no audience. I've filed reports, brought receipts, followed the rules. Trouble's already here. I'm just denying it a seat at my table. He worked 4 nights straight. Welded the internal frame, set the rebar cage, poured the footing. Bolted cedar cladding around the core and rubbed it with oil until it looked like something from a magazine cover. Tasteful, understated, approved. On the 5th night, he and Layla stenciled the numbers again. She picked a font that made her smile. When he stepped back, the post glowed in the porch light. Ordinary as a handshake, unmistakable as a promise. Nia watched from the steps. You sure? She asked softly. No, Elijah admitted. But I'm sure of me. The crash came on a Tuesday, 4:45, sun throwing long shadows that made the street look like piano keys. Elijah was under the sink fixing a leak. The sound punched through the pipes, a blunt thud that didn't wander but hit and stayed. He stood so fast he nearly cracked his head on the cabinet. By the time he reached the yard, neighbors were already stepping onto porches. A white HOA patrol SUV hunched at an angle, front bumper folded like a bad decision. Steam ribboned from the hood. The mailbox stood unscathed. Cedar gleamed. Steel didn't even bother to announce itself. The driver, young, pale, a jawline that hadn't yet learned consequences, stared at the post, then at Elijah, then at the post again. You can't put that there, he said, voice unsteady. It's a mailbox, Elijah said. On my property. That thing's a hazard. Then don't hit it. The driver fumbled for his radio. Within minutes, the president's black sedan rolled up and Brent stepped out, smoothing his tie as if the air had wrinkled it. Pam arrived 2 minutes later in a powder blue Tesla, heels clicking too sharply for the asphalt. Brent took in the scene, the crowd, the camera phones. He selected his tone like a suit. Mr. Graves, he said, hands open in fake conciliation. This is exactly what we feared. What you feared, Elijah said, was accountability. People shifted. Harlan folded his arms and grinned. Pam nodded toward the unscathed post. We'll need to examine this for compliance. If it's been modified to create unnecessary risk, it's a mailbox, Ms. Duquesne, Elijah said. It meets height, meets setback, meets your paint color guidelines, and then some. The only unusual feature is that it refuses to play dead when your drivers can't keep between the lines. Brent gestured to the smashed patrol car. A person could have been injured. A person was, Elijah said. For a year. He just didn't bleed. Murmurs. Someone in the back, a woman Elijah barely knew but recognized from the pool committee, said, He's right. Pam's smile was thin enough to slice paper. We'll be in touch. They were. The letter came printed on cream stock with the HOA watermark like a seal from a petty king. Notice of violation, unsafe structure. Immediate removal required. Fines to accrue daily. Nia read it silently, then pressed it flat on the table and smoothed a non-existent wrinkle. We can't afford a fight, she said. Not a long one, Elijah nodded. We also can't afford to be the family that gets rolled. Not again. Not here. He remembered other rooms, other tables, other voices telling him he was too intense, too direct, not a cultural fit. He remembered the way security guards at his former plant had looked twice when he used his own badge. He remembered Layla coming home in tears because a classmate said her hair looked messy, and the teacher had said maybe the wild look was distracting. He remembered the night a county cop trailed him for 12 blocks because his tail light was out by a flicker, then told him to get out of the car because you fit a description. The mailbox wasn't just a box. It was a sacrament. They found a lawyer 2 towns over, Aisha McCrae, a litigator with a braid down her back and a laugh that rang like a gavel when she was amused by foolishness. She wasn't amused by the HOA. Postal regs are federal, Aisha said, flipping through the HOA bylaws with a pen poised for blood. HOAs can regulate aesthetics, not structure. If it meets height and setback, you're fine. The unsafe claim is hot air unless they can prove negligence. They'll try, Elijah said. They always do, Aisha replied. They count on folks folding. Don't fold. She filed a response that read like a mirror held too close for comfort. Attached were photos, receipts, time-stamped videos Elijah had begun taking after the third hit, a patrol SUV brushing the shoulder, the swing outward like habit, a habit with consequences. She included a demand for reimbursement and retraining policy. The HOA posted breathless updates on the community page about public safety and rogue structures. Brent wrote, "We value unity. We cannot allow one resident's personal crusade to endanger our volunteers," and signed it like a sermon. Half the comments applauded. Half said, "Maybe stop hitting his stuff." A quarter of them said, "Funny how accidents seem to pick the same address," and those were the ones that made other people go quiet. Someone slid a note into Elijah's storm door at midnight. "Take it down before someone gets hurt." He taped it to the fridge like an art project and wrote beneath it in Sharpie, "Already happened," 5 times. The patrol cars began lingering. White SUVs idling at the end of Elijah's street, lights flicking in quiet threat. Elijah waved when he checked the mail. They didn't wave back, Layla asked. "Are they mad at us?" "They're mad that no works," Elijah said. "Does no always work?" "No," Elijah said, "but it works more often than people think." At the next board meeting, the room was packed. Aisha sat beside Elijah in the front row, legal pad in her lap, eyes soft but unblinking. Nia took the seat behind them with Layla and Harlan. Brent tapped the mic. "We'll begin," he said, voice heavy with the righteousness of a man rehearsed. He rehashed the letter, the fines, the unsafe language, and then paused for Powell and Pearl's optics. "We must do what's best for the community as a whole," he intoned. Elijah stood. "The community as a whole hits my mailbox?" A laugh broke like a wave in the room. Brent's jaw flexed. "Mr. Graves, please sit. You'll have your turn." "This is my turn," Elijah said. "I've had the floor for a year and nobody listened because my voice didn't sound like yours." Pam rose. "This is inappropriate." Aisha stood too, and her voice cut through with the elegant precision of a weld. "What's inappropriate is slander dressed as policy. If your patrol cannot navigate a straight street without striking federal postal equipment, your training is inadequate and your exposure considerable. My client's structure is compliant. Retrain your drivers, reimburse the damage, and stop using fines as a cudgel to silence a black family who asked to be treated like their neighbors." There it was. The word some of them had been tiptoeing around like a crack in a church floor. Black. A man in the back blurted, "Oh, come on, this isn't about race." Elijah turned. "When I mentioned this to my white neighbor, the patrol captain called him personally to apologize. When I mentioned it to this board, I was told to move my mailbox back. When I recorded video, folks online said I staged it. When a patrol car finally broke itself on my dignity, I got a legal notice. I've been black the whole time." The treatment didn't change when the facts changed. It changed when I refused to swallow them. Silence. Big and strange. Like a new room they hadn't wanted to enter. Harlan raised his cane. "I'm 73, he said. "I've lived through a few things. If you think this ain't about race at all, you ain't lived enough." Pam cleared her throat, cheeks tight. "We are happy to discuss de-escalation options." Aisha smiled without her eyes. "We're happy to discuss reimbursement and training. And if you want to talk de-escalation, stop parking patrol cars outside my client's home like a failed sting." The vote to continue fines sputtered on a motion that never found a second. They kicked it to further review. That was the first crack. 2 weeks later, after the HOA insisted on mediation to avoid a hearing that would become public record, they folded. They agreed to reimburse Elijah for all 5 mailboxes, to issue a policy update on patrol driving standards, to mail an apology that fell like a weak apology always falls, late, careful, relieved of specificity. The fines vanished like a rumor in bright light. The mailbox stayed. Of course it did. The news might have ended there. Quiet agreements, a stubborn post, a neighborhood that learned to drive straighter. But that's not how stories travel. A local journalist, a black woman named Imani Brooks, came to the cul-de-sac with a camera and a notebook because a friend said, There's a man down in North Ridge who built a box that won't bow. She filmed Elijah handing Layla the mail. She filmed Nia waving from the porch. She filmed the post and explained what had happened to anyone listening who had ever been told to be calmer, to be grateful, to be smaller. The segment ran on a Thursday night between a high school football preview and a piece about a stray goat on the freeway. Then it went online. Comments flooded in. Black homeowners from other states wrote, "We've been fined 3 times for having the wrong shade of mulch." A Latina teacher wrote, "They wrote us up for a basketball hoop that was there when we moved in." A white veteran wrote, "I put my flag at an angle and they threatened to sue." A mixed-race couple wrote simply, "Thank you." Elijah didn't want a movement. He wanted his life. But movements are made of lives that say, "Not today, and not here, and not mine" in 1,000 registers until the harmony becomes undeniable. 3 Sundays after the mediation, a group of neighbors met on Elijah's lawn with lawn chairs and lemonade, and the curious relief of people who had picked a side and found their neighbors there. They weren't all black. They weren't all angry. But they had learned the difference between a complaint and a boundary. Harlan sat like a king in plastic. Layla braided pipe cleaners into crowns and passed them out like tickets. And Nia told Imani off camera, "It's not about a mailbox. I want my daughter to know that we do not get smaller because someone is inconvenienced by our size." The HOA sent an email about enhancing community dialogue. Brent did not stop by. Months later, Elijah still heard engines at night, but the sound didn't climb his spine anymore. Patrol cars rolled by at sensible speeds. Mailboxes up and down the block remained upright. People waved more, partly because they meant it, and partly because they had learned the utility of being seen. A letter came in September with a heavy envelope and a lighter heart. The North Ridge Community Association invited Elijah to chair a new Safety and Standards subcommittee. The language was careful, as if stretched over old bones. He read it twice, then a third time, then laid it next to the apology and noticed how both documents were compliments built from fear. He didn't answer for a week. When he did, he said yes, but on his terms. He'd chair it if they added 2 renters to the committee, if minutes were public, if every citation required a photo and a policy reference attached. He wanted sunlight. He wanted receipts. He wanted a community that could say, "We did it, and here's how," in the same sentence. Brent called him, voice small for the first time Elijah had ever heard it. "We can make that work," he said. "I know," Elijah said. "You could have made it work a year ago." "My mistake," Brent offered. "No," Elijah said. "Your choice." After he hung up, Elijah took Layla to the curb. They stood in the gold of late afternoon and ran their fingers over the cedar as if blessing it. "Why do we keep this one?" Layla asked. "We could have a fancy one from the catalog." "Because this one remembers," Elijah said. "Remembers what?" "That we stood," he said simply. Layla nodded like she understood more than he did. On a Wednesday in winter, when the sun slid low and the street smelled like chimney smoke and the memory of summer, a different car pulled up to the curb. Not white, not humming victory, a battered gray sedan. A woman in a postal uniform stepped out, middle-aged, eyes weary. She tapped the post once, like testing a bridge. "This one's solid," she said. Elijah smiled. "It needed to be." She squinted at the number. "You the Graves family?" "We are." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of letters. The top one was from a boy in Layla's school who had seen the news clip and wrote in careful block letters that he didn't like when the teacher touched his hair. Beneath it, a card from a retiree 2 neighborhoods over who wrote that the HOA left a citation on her porch instead of her mailbox because she used a mobility scooter and never made it to the curb. Beneath that, bills, circulars, a life in paper slices. "Thank you," Elijah said to the carrier, and he meant it too many ways at once. "For what?" she asked. "For bringing the things people are brave enough to send." She tipped him a 2-fingered salute and went on. Elijah looked at the mailbox and thought about the first time they'd replaced it. How he'd felt silly for caring so much. He thought about the 5th time. How he'd felt foolish for believing rules could hold when the people holding them didn't have to. He thought about that meeting where the word black changed the oxygen in the room like a door opening to winter. He didn't think of victory. He thought of equilibrium, of the way a balanced machine hums, of the way steel insists on the shape it was given unless you heat it, of the way a line drawn honest is harder to erase than the scribble that came before it. That night, Nia found him on the porch long after Layla's nightlight winked out. "You don't have to keep watch," she teased. "I'm not," he said. "I'm keeping score." "On what?" "Respect," Elijah said. "Not points, measures." It's quieter now. "That counts," she slipped her hand into his. "You know you didn't have to fix the world with a mailbox?" "I didn't fix the world," he said. "I fixed us." Turns out that's where the world leaks. They sat in a silence that didn't hurt. A car rolled past, slow and careful. The driver waved. Elijah waved back. The sound reached them a few seconds later, the hum of an engine minding its business. It wasn't a hymn exactly, but it felt like a song that towns learn when they're ready to hear themselves. Inside, on the fridge, the midnight note hung beside Layla's A+ science project and a curling photo of Elijah's mom in church whites. He'd left it there on purpose. It told the story plainer than he ever could. Take it down before someone gets hurt. Beneath, in Sharpie, his answer, "We stood it up so we wouldn't be." And because the world is made of 1,000 mailboxes, some cedar, some steel, some just a shoebox taped together in a cheap apartment that still thinks it's good enough. People drove past Elijah's now ordinary post and slowed a little. They didn't all know the story. They didn't have to. The shape of what stands for itself is hard to ignore. The box didn't bow. The family didn't either. That was the whole thing and the beginning of everything else.